I sarcastically named my valedictorian speech Fortune Cookie. Hello, and welcome back to the And I Didn't Die podcast with your host and life coach, Jennifer Ho. You're all in for a big treat today because I usually only bring up being valedictorian in high school briefly as a fun fact about myself, or maybe in Two Truths and a Lie. But today I'm sharing the whole story as best as I can remember with all the thoughts and feelings I have about it. In the rare moments when I do bring up graduating top of my class, people usually have a picture in their head. Proud parents, academic glory, maybe even the standing ovation at graduation. And then they think it ends with me getting into a good college or university just to realize that I'm one of many valedictorians. Just another high achiever, big fish, small pond, woe is me kind of story. And I admit that is my story too, but that's not the story I'm telling today. I did not grow up dreaming of being valedictorian. I couldn't care less about this competition. But then in 7th grade, this boy randomly declared that he was going to beat me and be valedictorian in high school. I was like, we're not even in high school yet, man. And every time I tell this story, people generally interrupt and ask, wait, was he a white boy? And yes, of course he was. I grew up in a predominantly white community, and of all the other great students and smart kids, he did not set out to be their rival. Nope, just me, the Asian girl. And that's part of it, isn't it? The model minority myth. He saw me as the one to beat because we're the ones who are supposed to be good at school. The quiet, obedient, high-achieving Asian kids. We're the standard to measure yourself against and the stereotype to try and outdo. The irony is I wasn't even trying to win. I wasn't trying to be anyone's academic rival. I was just trying to get through school and keep myself together. My parents did talk about college, but I was still a kid, and they would just say "Đại học" in Vietnamese. So I didn't actually make the connection until 8th grade when kids at school were comparing Stanford and UC Berkeley that was college, that Đại học is college. And while some immigrant parents push their kids to be number one, mine didn't. I handed them every perfect report card and they barely looked up. We didn't put that stuff on our fridge, just fruit magnets. There was not really that much pride, no celebration, no "we're so proud of you." And that kind of sucked, but it was also a relief that they weren't worried about me. They knew I was competent, and I knew I was competent. At least that's how I consoled myself. And looking back, yes, it would be nice to receive their care, but this story isn't necessarily about that either. All of this said, I did find consolation in doing things right. It's really comfortable to follow rules. Being a model daughter, a model student, what I didn't realize was I was playing right into model minority. It wasn't until high school that I gained a deeper understanding that conforming to the model was simply assumed of me by others, and that was not exactly something to celebrate. And I was glad that school came pretty easily to me and I didn't have to worry about my grades or stress about tests very much, but I did feel this desire to be celebrated for something beyond academic success, because academic success didn't feel all that worthy of being celebrated. At home, my parents seemed neutral, and at school, it felt like academic achievement didn't come with as much joy and attention and fervor as sports. The school athletes were celebrated constantly after all their games, but the valedictorian race was invisible. It was silent and secretive until the end. There would be award ceremonies every semester for academic achievement, but they weren't like football games. These ceremonies were more formal and even a bit stuffy, and there was never a public indication of where you ranked in your class. You would know by the number on your personal report card, but others wouldn't know unless they asked. Well, Senior year in high school rolled around, and before graduation, there was one last award ceremony. I knew I'd collect another certificate and another medal, and at this point, it just felt repetitive and mundane. Until, leading up to this award ceremony, teachers started asking me if I would be there. And they also asked if my parents would be there. I told them my parents probably wouldn't go, and I also wasn't keen on it myself. But because they were asking, I sensed something was up. Then one day, I was summoned into the main office. I was like, am I being called to the principal's office? Did I do something wrong? Am I in trouble? I was not looking forward to it. I reluctantly went, and when I got there, they're like, oh, you can go see your guidance counselor. I walked into her office, we exchanged some small talk, and then she told me it was important that I be at the award ceremony and that my parents are there too. She asked me if I wanted to call my parents and if I wanted them to talk to them. And I remember just thinking, what's with all this fuss now? No one insisted that my parents attend an award ceremony before, especially not the guidance counselor who I never really talked to. I understood the attention from my teachers to some extent because I actually had a relationship with them, but why was the guidance counselor intervening too? What assumptions were they making about me and my family? Ugh. So for award ceremonies, in my family, the usual routine would be me getting a ride with a friend and their parents, and then they take me home after. My parents didn't go to these, and it was normal to me. At this point in time, they had 3 daughters at 3 different schools. So the most efficient thing is to skip all of these ceremonies and reliably be at home. Have dinner with as many family members as possible at home, because this time is important to us. And because they're not at the ceremony with me, they made sure that I always had something to eat when I came home. In my family, food is definitely a love language. So I didn't quite get what the big deal was with my teachers and the guidance counselor and the school. And I already knew I was top of the class. My report card said so. So as the guidance counselor spoke to me, I wondered what they were thinking of my parents. And I also wondered what delicious meal I'd be missing because I now felt obligated to go to the award ceremony. This was over a decade ago now, so my memory is a bit fuzzy and I don't really remember if my parents actually attended after all. I'm not sure if I asked them. I do remember the shoes that I wore that night though, these indigo suede pumps with a peep toe. The color was great, but never again with the peep toe for me. Anyway, back to the award ceremony. I went and I felt like I sat through hours and hours of various awards being given out. And then finally, at the very end, oh my goodness, they had saved the best for last. They announced 2 salutatorians. Immediately, I was like, how can you have 2 people ranking second highest? Now here's the kicker. After all the fuss from all of the adults, at the very end, I found out there were also 2 valedictorians. Of course, one was me, but guess who the other one was? The boy who self-proclaimed to be my rival in 7th grade. Years ago. How annoying! Even more annoying to find out, my GPA was higher. But apparently because it was super close, they just felt like it was fair for both of us to be valedictorian. I'm sorry, but last I checked, having the highest GPA makes you valedictorian. Did his report card also say that he was number 1? I highly doubt that the system interpreted it that way. If this was sports, track and field for example, and we were competing in the 100-meter dash, if I finished the race just 1 millisecond faster than that boy, I would have won first. We would not have tied. Why were the rules different in the academic race? Oh, I felt really ungrateful back then for wondering all of this, especially since I wasn't all that excited to go to the award ceremony. But still, this grand celebratory moment that I didn't even ask for, why did I feel like I was being robbed of it? I couldn't help but wonder if it would play out the same way if the white boy had had the higher GPA. While I had a good understanding back then of how the model minority myth paints Asian Americans as successful, I didn't yet understand the part where it also paints us as compliant and low maintenance. The harmful part of being the good example is that we're also expected to quietly accept whatever outcomes we're handed. I honestly couldn't articulate all of this back then, and I never voiced any of these thoughts either. And this is really the first time I'm sharing this story from the lens of how unfair I felt everything was. And I didn't quite know what I was doing at the time, but in hindsight, I would like to acknowledge myself for my own personal rebellion. So do you know what you get as valedictorian and salutatorian in your last weeks before graduation? Well, while you still have finals to take just like everyone else, you also get to prepare a speech for graduation. More homework! I did not want to do it. I was prepared to decline the opportunity. I even told teachers as they checked in. But this time, unlike with trying to herd my parents to the award ceremony, I was grateful for their input. I don't remember his words exactly, but my wise English teacher essentially told me that I had been given a platform and that it was important that I exercise my voice. Okay, this resonated with me and it shifted something in me. But still, as an 18-year-old, I begrudgingly obliged. So, our group of the 4 top students, we were introduced to the teacher in charge of helping us with our speeches. So, along with these 3 other students, we sat I think we were pulled out of class and we sat together and shared ideas and discussed what the order of the speeches might be. And this teacher said he would decide after seeing our drafts. I hadn't felt a sense of competition when I was unwillingly named that boy's rival, and I hadn't felt particularly proud of being valedictorian, but I do remember suddenly feeling fired up about the speech. If I couldn't be the only one at the top of the class, I was going to have the best speech and the last word, because they always save the best for last. I put together a speech that was future-oriented, about what to do after we close this chapter, about making space for our dreams. And I was indeed chosen to give my speech last. I titled it Fortune Cookie, and yes, it was sarcastic. It was a jab at how people expected me to smile and bow down while being handed this diluted win. It was unfair, and I did not feel happy about that. So naming the speech that way was my quiet way of poking at the expectations people had of me as an Asian. Say something inspirational. Be grateful. Don't stir the pot. But I wanted to stir the pot just a little in my own style. And I have to give my 18-year-old self so much credit. The title was a clever nod to my Asian roots, but also a subtle way of testing people to see if they would think twice. Would anyone call me out for using a Chinese reference even though I'm Vietnamese? Would anyone know that fortune cookies aren't actually from China at all? Nobody asked. And I delivered that speech with the quiet satisfaction that I was the only one on that stage that could get away with calling it fortune cookie. To this day, I'm still not all that proud of being valedictorian, but I sure as hell am proud of my personal rebellion that brought me joy. It can definitely be disorienting and confusing to realize that doing everything right still doesn't guarantee fair treatment and fair outcomes. That even when you win, you might have to share the spotlight. When this happens, it's important to name what happened, to let yourself admit that it was unfair instead of stuffing it down. Don't gaslight yourself. This is how you get to claim your story. I'd love to hear about your own fortune cookie moments, the times where you created your personal rebellion. Send me a DM or leave a comment on this episode. I'd love to hear your story too. And I'll talk to you again soon.